I'm 19, and I live on a farm in a rural area with just my mom and older sister. There are no houses around us, just long stretches of fields and open land. Usually I go out back and do most of the work around the farm myself, while my mother handles the business side of things. My sister works in the city and has an office job. She usually gets home pretty late. One night I was outside fixing the porch light when my sister pulls into the driveway. Going by how late it was and the fact that she looked exhausted, I figured that she had had a tough day at work. But when I went inside the house, I found her talking to Mom in a low, hushed tone. I asked what happened, and my sister explained to me that there was a car following her on her way back home. This car had apparently been following her all week. She said that they would usually tailgate her for a short while and then turn away, but this time, they were tailing her almost the entire way. She took a bunch of wrong turns to lose them, which is why she was so late that night. My mom advised her to inform the police, and I supported that. My sister is capable and all, but she's also too friendly sometimes, and has frequently found herself in situations with creepy individuals. All of her ex-boyfriends have turned out to be assholes or stalkers. She's just too trusting of people at times. Unfortunately, she forgot to copy down the license plate number of the car, so she just gave the police a description of it. It was a light blue sedan, one of the older models. They told her to call it in if she noticed the car again, and that was all that could be done for now. A couple of days went by, and nothing happened. The car had apparently stopped following her. However, a package was delivered to our front doorstep. It wasn't something from UPS or the Postal Service. It was a shoebox. I saw it first when I was heading out to do work on the farm. I opened it to find a video cassette. I popped it into our old VCR. It turns out it was surveillance footage of the front of our house. It started when my sister left for work and stops when she returned home. There was a cut in between, otherwise it would have been over 8 hours of footage. I showed my sister when she woke up. She claimed that this was filmed the day before she called the police about the tailgater, going by the weather and the clothing she had on in the video. Obviously, we were all freaked out. She and my mom stayed inside, while I went out to check out the spot where the video had been recorded from. The vantage point was pretty far away from my house. I could only make a guess that it was from somewhere by the edge of the front pasture, but there was no trace of a camera or tripod. Since it was raining the day this video was recorded, any markings in the dirt or footprints had been washed away. We contacted the police again, and they asked her to bring in the tape. They said they couldn't do anything because there was no direct threat, only an implied one, and we also couldn't prove that it had been recorded on our property. The person who sent in this tape was clearly doing it to taunt us. As of the writing of this story, another tape showed up on our doorstep yesterday, depicting the same thing. I'm a female, and I was 20 years old when this happened. At the time, I was a junior in college. I transferred from a local community college to a university a few hours away. Due to a communication issue with the admissions office, I had a very short amount of time to find a living accommodation. I didn't know the area, and I had to resort to looking at Craigslist ads for a room to rent. Thankfully, I found a place near my school and met up with the guy who was renting out the room. It was a large house in a very nice neighborhood. The man's name was Peter. He was in his early 30s, worked mostly from home, and was very polite. Peter also rented out a room to another university student who was out of town until the semester began. When I eventually met the other roommate, he was mostly quiet and kept to himself for the most part. For my first week, I was completely alone in the house. Peter was out of town on a business trip, and the roommate had not returned from his parents' place yet. Not gonna lie, being alone in the house was a bit eerie. It was so large and mostly unfurnished. Aside from a couch and a television set in the living room, there was a locked upstairs level that you could only access from an outdoor staircase that was directly outside of my bedroom. The house seemed to have several additions, so the layout was a bit odd. My bedroom was very spacious and had visible wiring throughout the room. The closet had a broken door that was propped up to the side. Peter told me that the previous owners had used it as an office. I checked out the wiring because it gave me a bad feeling, but I didn't find anything suspicious about them, mostly because I had no idea what to look for. Once Peter returned, I noticed a few odd things about him. He would say strange things to me that were vaguely sexual. He also liked to take pictures of me without my consent and post them to Facebook, usually tagging me in them. At first, the pictures were very mundane, such as me sitting on the couch or typing on my laptop at the kitchen table. He would turn the flash off, so I never knew when he was taking these photos, until I saw them online later. The pictures became more invasive over time. There was one of me in a towel when I was in the hallway walking from my bathroom to the bedroom. Another was of me tanning in the backyard. At the time, I didn't know he was home. I found Peter to be strange, and I was uncomfortable around him. But the room was a steal, and the location was good for my school. The other roommate shared a thermostat with me. It controlled my bedroom, his bedroom, and the hallway that led out to the living room. It was located in my bedroom, so I always left the door unlocked for him to change it if needed. One day, when Peter was out of town, the roommate was adjusting the thermostat when he noticed something strange behind one of the wires in my closet. He called me over to inspect it. It looked like a tiny black ball. I didn't know for sure, but it looked like it could be a small camera. So I put a piece of tape over it and considered calling Peter, but I didn't want to accuse him of something that I didn't know was true. So the roommate and I decided that we would ask him together when he returned from his trip. 2 nights later, I woke up from a deep sleep. I was disoriented, but I noticed my bedroom door was open, and someone was moving around inside my closet. I stayed very still and tried to make out who the figure was. As I mentioned, I thought it might have been my roommate adjusting the thermostat, but my eyes had not adapted to the darkness yet. But I could clearly see someone moving from the closet to the open door. The figure left, and I turned on the light to inspect my closet. I saw that the piece of tape that I had placed there 2 nights ago was now missing. I then opened my door and saw Peter walking down the hallway back to his bedroom. I quietly followed him, and after he opened his bedroom door, I confronted him, demanding to know what the hell he was doing in my bedroom in the middle of the night. He jumped when he saw me. He was obviously taken off guard. Behind him on his laptop computer was a grainy video feed of my bedroom, where I could clearly see that my bed was in the frame. Although Peter was a creepy man, he wasn't the confrontational type, and he immediately began apologizing and trying to explain that this wasn't what it looked like. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do since it was his property, but I covered the camera back up and moved out as quickly as I could. I did file a police report, but I don't want to get into that too much since the case is technically still open, but I finally wanted to get this experience off my chest. I'm not sure how much footage Peter has of me, or if he's posted it somewhere online, or if he ever captured anything worthy of being posted, other than maybe a few nude shots. The other roommate moved out around the same time I did, and the last time I drove by that house was a few months ago, and there was a foreclosure sign in the front yard. I'm a police officer who works in a major city in Australia. I'd rather not say which one. This whole experience started this past Monday, when I was working my station's front desk. Our command is in a pretty rough area, so even around lunchtime on a weekday, the place is packed. Most of the people in the lobby were there to report on bail, and that demographic tends to look how you would imagine. But there was one woman who stood out among the rest. It wasn't just her lack of face tattoos, it was because she appeared to be very nervous. When it got to her turn, the first thing she said was, "I might need to talk to a detective." That's usually a pretty good icebreaker in this profession, and my notebook was out right away. I explained that she could talk to me first, and that I would see what I could do. Cops over here are a bit less jumpy about people pulling black objects out of their bags than they are in the States. Let's not get political, I'm just stating facts. However, I was still surprised when the woman pulled out a VHS tape from her bag and slid it underneath the glass. It took a few minutes for me to get the full story out of her, because she seemed to go back and forth between being utterly horrified, then embarrassed, and kept apologizing for wasting police resources on what she said was probably nothing. Basically, she told me that a couple of months ago, she had been jogging around her area when she passed a whole bunch of furniture and personal items sitting by the sidewalk outside of a house. Judging by how much stuff there was, she assumed it was actually there waiting for a disposal company, and she decided to pick through it and saw a box with a VCR in it. She came back later in her car and took it home. She was going to check to see if it worked and try to flip it on eBay. It ended up sitting on her shelf for 2 months before she finally got around to testing it out. She bought a random tape from a thrift store, but when she tried to insert it, she discovered there was already a tape left inside. I thought it was stupid that she would run out and buy a tape without at least checking the VCR first. I took her into one of the interrogation rooms and had a staff member wheel in one of the TV carts. Some of our training videos for new recruits haven't been updated since the 1980s, and we still showed them on VHS. So we sat down and watched what was on the tape. It was labeled SEC Camera Club. It began with a woman tied to a chair inside of a room. The camera's POV walked around her before coming uncomfortably close to the woman's face. You could hear the camera operator panting heavily throughout the film. Soon, the tied-up woman began begging for her life. The woman who was sitting next to me in the interrogation room, whose name was Jennifer, asked if she could step out into the hall before the next part. I granted her request. What was depicted next still makes me feel sick just thinking about it. There's a chance it could have been fake, but by the way it was shot, and the terrified look on the tied-up woman's face, it seemed real to me in the moment. The cameraman pulled out a knife, and you can guess what happened next. The screams I heard on that tape still haunt me. I was shocked. I must have looked like an idiot because I had no idea what to tell her when I came back out into the hallway. In the end, I wheeled the TV into my sergeant's office, and he basically laughed in my face and said that this was all fake. He had been a cop for 13 years and had been to dozens of stabbings, and there was never that much blood. The cranky bastard then got pissed off at me that I had spent so much time watching a horror film when the lobby was still full of people. Even before the pandemic, the sergeant didn't like too many customers waiting around the station. I relayed what my sergeant told me to Jennifer. She was both relieved and embarrassed. I tried to give her the tape back, but she recoiled and told me to chuck it out for her. She didn't want it. I've been doing some independent research on what could have been on the tape. The only thing I can compare it to is a 1978 horror film called Faces of Death. It's a film that is presented as if it were an actual documentary, presenting the viewer with disturbing footage that depicts various ways of dying. The film is tame by today's standards, but was very shocking for its time because of the realistic nature of its presentation. Fair warning, if you love animals, do not look up that film. Now, to be clear, it wasn't a scene from Faces of Death, but I'm wondering if it's something from a similar production. Referring back to my notes from that day, the video was well lit, and the woman and the killer were wearing normal clothing. The walls of the room looked like corrugated iron, perhaps from a shed or maybe a barn. Has anyone ever heard of the SEC Camera Club? There were no serial numbers on the videotape, and my Google searches have failed to unearth any further information regarding this. I'm assuming it must have been from some underground bootlegging company that specialized in selling exploitation films. Or maybe it was a group of amateur filmmakers trying to make this look as real as possible. I'm just guessing here, and I know this is all very scant information to go off of. But if you know anything about this, please leave a comment below.
There's always a reason to be afraid.